This is a quote from David Crane, and I think he steadfastly had a very firm view around how he thought new nuclear should be developed in the United States. And for us, we're developing the STP 3 and 4 project, which is a 2,700 two-unit ABWR plant down in Matagorda County, Texas. And his view really shaped our development path, which is trying to create early certainty around price, schedule, performance, financing, partners, and offtake. It also led to our selection of our technology, the ABWR technology, which has actually been constructed on time and actually has 12 years of operating history. When we think about our project in the development phase through construction, we think about it in two different ways. The first is pre-financing. So prior to actually having any DOE or other loan guarantees in place, it's the period of time where it's all owner's risk. It's owner's equity that's going into the investment, and we carry the risk during that period of time. The second phase is really post-financing. So DOE and Japanese loan financing, in our case, would actually be in place. We'd have a fixed price established. We'd have our combined operating license in place from the NRC. And we'd start construction for the project. All our guaranteed schedules and performance guarantees and warranties would be in place at that time. We see that the majority of our risk during this first phase, and it's about 40 months, so it's not a short duration where we have equity at risk. It's really around commodity and currency risk that we have a significant amount of risk. When we think about post-financial close and those risks, we try to mitigate those risks from contractual relationships that we have with Toshiba and our partners to the selection of our partners and also in our development approach. When we think about construction delay, we're building a plant that's been built 4 times in Japan in 37 to 43 months from first safety concrete to fuel load. We're using all the same modularization and construction methods that the Japanese use, so open-top construction, over 360 modules across the 2 units. We've selected Toshiba, who's been a prime contractor for 17 BWR plants built in Japan, 2 of which are ABWRs. And we've also secured significant construction delayed liquidated damages that cover our interest during construction, our direct labor costs, and other costs that would be associated with a potential delay. When we think about cost overruns, we've secured over $1 billion of limitation of liability from Toshiba Corporation for each of the units. These projects will be 95% engineering complete by the time we start construction, and since they have been operating for over 12 years, it has minimal first-of-a-kind engineering. When you look at other generation development out there, when you go to the field, it typically is much lower percentage of engineering complete. This will be 95%. We'll also have a fixed price in place at that point in time. The technology itself that we selected has, as I mentioned, an excellent track record for availability and output. Actually, Kashiwazaki 6 and 7, which is owned by Tokyo Electric Company, from the completion of construction until their first planned outage, their capacity factors on those 2 units, which most closely emulate what we'll be building in STP3 down in Matagorda at STP 3 and 4, was 100% capacity factor. So there's excellent early operating performance of these units. We also have reliability guarantees and output guarantees for the projects. And we're building in an ERCOT, which we think is a very competitive and robust market. And we're focused on putting MOUs in place for purchase power agreements with a number of different parties. Right now, we're slightly, for lack of a better word, oversubscribed for anticipated megawatt ownership in the company. To provide some context around the risks and activities over the project lifecycle, our approach during this, what we call pre-FNTP or pre-financial close period, is when we talk about shovel-ready projects, when they talk about the stimulus plan, we have over 500 people working on this project right now. Over the next 40 months, we'll be doing early site preparation, we'll be completing engineering, doing construction planning, we'll be buying and securing the vast majority of materials and equipment for the project, we'll do the excavation. We've selected a fabrication facility to do the improvements, and we'll actually be starting modularizations in 2011. We'll be securing our schedule and performance guarantees at the end of 2009. And we do this in a process of working very open and collaboratively and completely transparently with our partners to develop the actual costs. And then they apply a pre-negotiated fee and contingency on there. And then we want to shift risk at that point in time, at financial close, to the vendor. Based on Toshiba's experience of building ABWRs and their success in Japan and their confidence in the technology, as well as us securing the materials and equipment and doing all the engineering beforehand, they're able to assume that risk and shift that at financial close. And then we'll go through the construction period and then an extended warranty period. I mentioned a few times the contractual relationship that we have with Toshiba. We have an EPC contract that's been executed. It's effective now, all the way through final completion of the plant. We strongly believe as developers, most of us started our lives just before Nina at NRG, and David Crane had a strong view that we don't see development different for nuclear than we do for developing an IGCC plant, developing a supercritical coal plant, or a gas plant. We do not believe that owners should take on a higher degree of risks in developing those projects versus the EPC firms. There needs to be that continued balance. So we took a proxy of a 2-unit supercritical coal plant that was non-recourse financed as the terms and conditions that were necessary to build new nuclear. And we were successful at doing that. And in addition, when we executed that contract, we triggered a $500 million credit facility that'll cover all the payments for materials and equipment for our percentage of the ownership through financing, as well as these will be the same terms other than the credit facility that will utilize in 2 additional to-be-announced 2-unit projects to be announced in the future. Up here is just a representation. There's always this talk around how expensive nuclear is going to be, and there's a lot of risks, and there are, just like there are in a lot of the technologies I think you've heard about today. But things have changed, actually, in a number of things. As I mentioned before, commodity risk is a significant amount of our risk over the next 24 to 30 months as we actually start securing the majority of materials and equipment for the project. And what we've seen since August of 2008 is quite a big retrenchment in commodity prices. I mean, in many ways, and this is just spot market snapshots. If you look at forward curves, you'll see the same drop-off. In some ways, we're living in a cost structure of 2005. We're even seeing some softening in labor. You look at a project controls person that we just contracted for the project now, that price point a year ago was 20% higher. So we lost 104,000 construction jobs last month in the United States. So I don't know how this will all translate to $1 per kW for our project, but there's certainly a downward trend. I mean, our last overnight estimate was in November of 2007. If you just take it from pure what commodity prices and indices were that would drive those costs, it would indicate that from an overnight standpoint, that project probably hasn't really increased much. But that's one of the things that we're working on now through the end of the year. Financing, we believe to create certainty around financing, we needed to go forward in 2 different paths. We're selected as a top-tier project by the Department of Energy for the Loan Guarantee Program. We expect to be in negotiations with them in the next 30 to 60 days on that process. We've also kicked off, after quite a bit of time of conversations over the last couple of years with the Japanese government, kicked off due diligence for the Japanese agencies on the project to provide a loan guarantee as well. So we fully expect the STP 3 and 4 project, that financing, to have both the U.S. and Japanese government support. I wanted to talk about, just briefly around offtake. Today, for those of you that don't know the project makeup, it's 50% owned by CPS Energy. It's 50% owned by NINA, which is an 88-12% JV between NRG and Toshiba, respectfully. We actually have MOUs in place to cover 40% of, slightly more than 40% of the output, which we expect to ultimately own. CPS and NINA started a public process a couple of weeks ago to sell down, a planned sell down of 20% of the project, so there'll be additional project additional partner in the project probably by the end of the summer. Just in closing remarks, I'd just like to reiterate things I heard from both Michael and Jacques. From Nina's perspective and I know from NRG's perspective and the investments they've made in other technologies, we believe that nuclear needs to be part of the solution. But solar, wind, conservation, efficiency are all part of the mix, and that nuclear is just one part of that.